Welcome back. Even though Indonesia's GDP contracted 3.49% on an annual basis in the third quarter, Finance Minister said the worst is over. This is because the minister sees that quarterly Indonesia has experienced recovery signs in many sectors.
The country fell into recessions for the first time since 1998. However, Finance Minister Sri Mulyani says that the recessions is not the end. A contractions in private consumptions and investment had eased the third quarter after suffering bigger blows in the previous 3 months.
Hampir semua sektor mengalami perbaikan atau turning point. Ini artinya di kuartal ketiga ini menunjukkan the worst is over, atau hal yang paling buruk, dampak terburuk dari COVID yang terjadi di kuartal kedua sudah kita lewati dan sekarang kita di dalam tahap pemulihan. Sektor yang terpukul pada triwulan 2 yang telah mengalami perbaikan sangat nyata seperti transportasi dan pergudangan.
The things that Minister highlights are more to government moves to control the coronavirus outbreak and ensure public discipline with health protocols. Those factors will determine whether the economy could further recover and see a GDP expansion in the fourth quarter. From all sources, IDX Channel.
First of all, what is a recession? We can call a country has entered recession if by 2 consecutive quarters a country suffers negative growth. And this is what exactly Indonesia has been through. Indonesia has officially entered its first recession since the 1998 Asian financial crisis, as its economy contracts again in the third quarter this year. Statistic Indonesia indicated all gross domestic product components fell amid the persistent rise in COVID-19 cases. And to get deeper view, let's see the first graphic regarding Indonesia's GDP condition from 2019 to 2020. I guess it's fair enough if we concluded, or if we conclude what happened in 2019 on Indonesia's economic growth was quite stable. But what happened entering 2020, Indonesia's economic growth keeps on corrected. And as we see from the graphic, in the second quarter of 2020, Indonesia's economic growth decreased to the level of minus 5.32%. Meantime, the latest data about Indonesia's economic growth in the third quarter of this year, Indonesia's economic growth corrected to the level of minus 3.49%. And well, actually, it is not a surprise. As forecast earlier, the Indonesian economy will contract in the third quarter of 2020 and the country would fall into recession. And yes, it comes true, sadly. The figure is worse than the 3% contraction forecast by a Reuters poll of analysts, as well as President Joko Widodo's expectation. And luckily, it is still narrower than the second quarter contraction of 5.32%. And if we talk about regions, there are regions that are more heavily impacted than other regions. Let's take a look on the next graphic. This is regions with highest regional economic growth correction. In the second quarter of 2020, Java corrected to the level of 6.69%. Meantime, in the third quarter, Java was corrected, or Java's economic growth corrected to the level of minus 4%. Meantime, Bali and Nusa in second quarter of 2020 was corrected to the level of minus 6.32%. Meantime, for the third quarter of 2020, Bali and Nusa corrected to 6.8%. Yeah, but then regions began to gradually lift the large-scale social restrictions and cities began reopening in June. Economic activity started stirring again in the third quarter. Therefore, regional governments believe that fourth quarter will be better than the third quarter. And however, although the economy continued to contract, the Jakarta Composite Index went up 1.85% following the recession announcement, while the rupiah appreciated 0.89% against the United States dollar. Well, some of you may be questioning, how can recession bring good market response? The answer is, there was a significant improvement in economic activity compared to the second quarter. We can examine more on quarter-to-quarter movement. Let's see on the next graphic. This is Indonesia's economic growth from quarter to quarter. The first quarter in 2020, it was in the level of 2.4%, or minus 2.4% to be exact, and the second quarter minus 4.19%. And in the third quarter, it was grow by 5.05%. Finance Minister Sri Mulyani sees that recession is not the end. She delivered her popular quote as the worst is over. A contraction is or in private consumption and investment had eased in the third quarter after suffering bigger blows in the previous quarter. Of course, we are hoping that economic activity will further improve in the fourth quarter with loosening social restrictions. And one good thing is Indonesia is not alone. The swift and massive shock of the coronavirus pandemic and shutdown measures to contain it have plunged the global economy into a severe contraction. At least we can apply Liverpool's motto here, you never walk alone. Pandemic hits worldwide and global world is now facing the same problem. Let's examine other countries' economic growth in 2020 so far. Yeah, as you can see, Indonesia, the data, it is shown in the graphic. In the first quarter of 2020, the growth of Indonesia's economic reached 2.97%. And as I mentioned to you before, the 2 quarters of Indonesia's economic growth corrected to the minus zone. Meantime, US, if we're talking about the growth in the third quarter, it was corrected to 2.9%. Meantime, for China, if we focus on what happened in the third quarter this year, it grew by 4.9%. Meantime, Singapore, in the third quarter of 2020, it was corrected to the level of -7. Meantime, in the second quarter of 2020, Singapore economic growth corrected to the level of 13.2%. And according to World Bank forecast, the global economy will shrink by 5.2% this year. That would represent the deepest recession since the Second World War. Terrible, isn't it? And don't forget, this global crisis can negatively affect your personal finances too. When an economy is in recession, financial risks increase, jobs and income are less stable, even household spending generally dips. So don't forget to keep your personal finances afloat while Indonesia's economy takes a beating. And we hope government can take concrete steps to deal with economic recession on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay tuned on Market Headlines because we'll be right back after the break.